I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Christopher Brown, the production designer for Showtime's The Comey Rule. The first question I wanted to ask is which set was the most daunting to design for this project?
Given the scope and scale and the lack of public domain visual reference for real spaces, dealing with the director's suite on the seventh floor of the FBI building was definitely something that we spent, I think, the most energy trying to make sure that we landed in a space that both satisfied the camera in terms of allowing depth and vista and openness, the design sensibility of wanting to make sure that the brutalist concrete building, which houses the FBI, was represented well on the interiors, and also that there was a sense of isolation and seclusion, and the director could feel himself, in a private space where he needed to be alone with what was going on, because ultimately he was making those choices and decisions.
And I appreciate your honesty on calling it a brutalist, the FBI building. He's not exaggerating. It is definitely, that's a good word for it. Um, uh, one of the things, of course, that everybody notices about Jim Comey in person is he is incredibly tall. And I was wondering if you were able, if you used like the production design to sort of like curtail it and make it seem like Jeff Daniels was a bit taller than he actually was.
Um, Not so much in the design sense. The one thing that I wanted to do, and that we carried out in that set, is that we ran floor to ceiling verticals to break up the glass and the panels in the walls. So there was a true sense of straight line dropping from floor to ceiling to help emphasize a vertical rectangle rather than a long horizontal rectangle. And so you could isolate somebody inside one of those rectangles. In the ceilings, I think we ended up with, I want to say, 11-foot ceilings in part of that set. So you can stand a man in that doorway, and the scale of the building dwarfs them in a way which I think sort of offsets the height of Director Comey, and also lends a sense of the building itself being larger than the people and the one person who's inhabiting it. And I think that was something that, in Billy's script, he referenced quite a bit: the permanence of institutions of government and the permanence of the buildings that line the streets of Washington, D.C., and those being things that stay as the cycle of people across administrations come and go and pass through. And so I think we tried to provide transition inside spaces that remained the same across administrations, whether that was Director Mueller to Director Comey, whether that was Sally Yates to Rod Rosenstein, whether that was Obama to Trump. All those things, the people walked through the same doorways, but the rooms and the feelings in the rooms for the people who worked there were very different in all of those situations.
So when you are laying out a scene's production design, are there any aspects that you take into consideration in order to show off certain things about the characters that are going to be in the scenes?
It depends on what the environment is, and maybe what the most important thing about the environment is. Certainly, when you're dealing with a personal, private space, someone's home, for instance, then you're considering all the sorts of character details, sense of economic class, you know, location in the world, time spent living in that particular place in terms of layers of things that have happened. Director Comey and his family, did not live in that house that's represented in the series for very long. They moved from somewhere else to come to DC. The kids grew up there a little bit, but then they've moved on to somewhere else. So it was needed to be layered with enough detail to provide, a real sense of family and space. But it wasn't someplace where somebody had lived for 30 years, which is a different kind of accumulation of texture and small detail and maybe some wear and tear. Uh, and all those things are thought about, that it all comes off the page. You read a scene, there's usually a setting that's described for it, and then you work out what that space is geographically. And then, people have conversations, director of photography, production designer, about how you're going to shoot it and what the camera's going to see. And then you think and try and create, a vibrant and dynamic, or occasionally a flat and sterile background for what's going on in the scene, in the moment, to reference where you are in story.
So, one of the probably the most notorious scene in this film is the scene between Comey and Trump, the dinner that they have together in the residence of the White House. And I was wondering what I mean, it's a scene that's filled with such tension, and even as someone who knew the details of that meeting pretty well, it's still something. It still came off so tense, and I was wondering, were there any aspects that you were able to bring through the production design to help heighten that tension?
Well, I think I would say that Elliot Davis, who was the director of photography, and I talked about, lighting and how to shape the room. I mean, both the green room where the loyalty dinner happened and the blue room where Jim Comey famously tried to disappear into the blue curtains are adjoining spaces on the state floor of the White House. So there's a historic debt which is owed in terms of rendering those spaces accurately, because they're available to the public, and you want to make sure that you're being honest in what you're presenting so that it feels like it's a real space. But how you focus the attention down and let the light fall off the walls and the chandelier loom over the top of the table, and the pair of windows be directly behind the two people who are in profile in their seats as they sit down, all shape how the intimacy and intensity of that dinner play out.
So you talked about sometimes using some of the things in the production design to heighten the characters. Were there any additional ones and you talked about Jim Comey, were there any additional ones that you were able to bring through with President Trump in the areas that he inhabited?
Sure. I mean, I think that the Trump Tower, Trump conference room scenes are a partial honest architectural shape and a lifted, enhanced decor. We looked at a couple different spaces. The Trump organization's conference room, where that meeting actually happened, is a white drywall box with a black shiny table, which was not going to speak to the character, to try and give us a sense of who he is. So we referenced the penthouse in the same building, which is his personal residence, which is quite opulent and quite extravagant, and tried to marry the two so that you would get a sense of who the man was before he was in office and what kind of sensibilities he might be bringing to the table in terms of style.
So I was also I'm always very curious. Do you find it easier to do production designs that are completely original, or to tackle designs of things that already exist?
It depends. I mean, whenever you're dealing with something that exists in real space and time, there's a need to discover the truth about what that is. But sometimes that truth, as it was with the Trump conference room, is not so. It's not so. I don't want to say useful. It's not so helpful at telling the story that you want to tell. So my personal opinion is you always need to know what the real thing is, and then you can, depart from that to support the story that you're telling as required. I mean, not everything needs to be a documentary. Sometimes you need to be presenting what the mood in the room is, and you enhance that through decor and style and architecture. I think that would definitely be a situation there where we were making a an honest and conscious decision to render the room in a heightened style for character effect. And so that the people who were, in from out of town, up from the, bureaucratic capital of our nation, were definitely not in a room where they were going to be comfortable with what they were looking at. And the people who were, about to come into power were in their domain, and they had the clear advantage in a sense of decor, I guess. If you're dealing with characters in work that is new and of whole cloth, there's a different sense of freedom for creation, and then it becomes a discussion about who are the characters in the story and how do you best support what their realities are. I think that's that offers certainly more expanse and more freedom to create. But I enjoy both.
Well, Christopher, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best during this upcoming Emmy season. And to our viewers, please like this video, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to go to goldderby.com and use the Gold Derby app to make your predictions and see if you can outsmart the top prognosticators in Hollywood. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you very much.